Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Pope Francis has been listed in critical condition for over 24 hours. We offer him our worldwide prayers. We Catholics, Christians have joined their voices, Protestants and Orthodox to ours. And the question becomes, as Francis continues to be in critical condition, he slept somewhat well last night, what are we actually praying for? So when someone is 88 years old, ill, particularly afraid of sickness and death, and has intoned this in the past, we say we pray for them. What specifically are we praying for? That's not a stupid question. And on Twitter of late, debates have erupted around the subject matter. What are we actually praying for, and what actually should we commentators be saying in this lame duck period of a pontificate? He is an 88-year-old man. I have been praying ceaselessly for Pope Francis with my family. I mean, multiple times a day, not actually ceaselessly. Much more frequently than I typically do. I try to remember the Pope in my prayers with my family as an intention of the prayers at least a couple times a week. But several times a day we've been praying for him. And here's the response. We're praying for A, his soul's state, and B, the state of the church. A, his soul's state, and B, the state of the church. Catholics are confused on etiquette in regard to the sickness and death of an 88-year-old pope. I'm certain of this because I've seen debates erupting on Twitter. We must pray for Pope Francis ceaselessly, like I said before, but for his soul's state and for the church's state, A and B, not for his bodily immortality. That's not what we're praying for when we say pray for the Pope. He is a nonagenarian, almost, in under 2 years. It's not, I repeat, not crass to prepare logistically, emotionally, and spiritually for next man up. Not crass. It is appropriate. It is meet to prepare emotionally, spiritually, logistically for next man up. And in that spirit, today we're going to run through the Papabilissimi, the most papable. But I'm giving you a bit of a disclaimer at the start of this special Papabilissimi episode of Rules for Retrogrades because so many debates have erupted. Mortality throws us all for a juke. It jukes us all, breaks all of our ankles. We don't know what to do with it. And people say things that superficially sound okay about an impending death or a recent death in the family or the family of Christ. Might sound okay on the surface, but when you poke or prod or ask any probative questions, they crumble. And that's what this podcast has done for you for 6 years. Masterfully, not perfectly, but masterfully at times, show you when there's superficial noise around an issue or not enough noise around another type of issue. There needs to be more noise around B, there needs to be less around A. So with an 88-year-old pope, this is an ungodly long life. I mean, in the Old Testament, you have Abram and others living really long. You have Nebuchadnezzar. But for most of human history, people did not live to be 88 years old. That's a fact. Pope Francis has lived a long life, a very rich, colorful life, and has led one of the worst pontificates, I say the worst, in our history. We don't have to all get amnesia when he falls ill. I don't forget that, nor do I forget the plain fact that he has asked for prayers on multiple occasions about being scared of sickness and death. Some people relate to this more than others. I have been specially praying, not just in some general passive-aggressive way for the state of the church, but for his soul's state, that he can correct some of his errors, find the strength and the probity to do so before he dies, whenever that occurs, but also specifically for this brush with death, whether this, we can only say retroactively, turns out to be his deathbed, have been his deathbed. He was scared like it was, I guarantee, and he said it. And I'm not mocking that. I'm deeply, deeply sympathetic. So I've been praying for the man, qua man. I've been praying for the man, qua pope. And I've been praying for the church, qua headed by a pope. Well, I'm saying that because that's what makes sense to do probatively. But I don't, same as I didn't get selective amnesia in regard to Pope Francis's expressed fears about falling sick and dying, I also don't get amnesia about the fact that he has been arguably our worst pope yet, and that the next man up for the job, number 267, or you never fully know if this pontificate was valid until after. Could be, theoretically, any pope could be a repeat, the real number 266. We'll have to wait for that. More on that later. With that, we do wait. We are going to wait. But we don't have to wait to say what's in store for us. We've had 12. It's February 27th was the end of Benedict's pontificate. 12 oh so turbulent years under this guy, Pope Francis, Holy Father. I mean, couldn't really imaginably have been more turbulent. And what's meet, what's due, what's appropriate, what's fitting, what's proper to give the man his propers is in regard to the context, all things in context. So if this were the holiest pope we ever had, if this were, Pius the Fifth or Pius the Ninth or Pius the 10th or Leo the 13th, some of my favorites, yeah, I would be saying different things. In those cases, I would be praying not only for the state of the man's soul, though I'd be less concerned about those guys' souls than Francis's, because I want Francis to go to heaven. I'm more concerned about Francis because of all the known public, I'm not scandalizing anyone, the public evils he's worked. So pray for him that he can undo that. I wouldn't be, I'd be praying for that, but in a less emphasized way with any of our great popes. I'd be praying for the state of the church, that we get a good new pope, and I'd probably be going through Papabile on a show then, even if it was Leo the 13th dying. But here's the difference. I would be praying if it were Leo the 13th and he were 88. I mean, the man had a long pontificate. Pius the Ninth had the longest ever, like 33 years or so, 32, 33. With either of those guys, if they were 88 and on what was ostensibly a deathbed, indeed, I would be praying, not immortality for them, but can we get 10 more years? Can we squeeze out 10 more years? Can we get 98? How about 108? Because they were such good pontificates. It is not a duty. It is not owed that I pray that this pontificate continues longer. I want Francis, the man, to go to heaven. I want Francis, the Pope, to undo his errors, qua Pope, to go to heaven, number 2. And number 3, I'm praying for the state of the church in regard to the next guy we get, because we have learned in real time, in the present, this generation, these generations who have lived under Francis, that a bad pope can work extreme ill on our church, can scare up righteous Protestant anger against the church, even in a time when many Protestants have good reason to be en masse converting to Catholicism. That's been slowed by Francis. The other world conditions have been ushering them in. It is Catholicism's time in spite of Francis. So you bet I am not praying specifically that Francis's pontificate continues. That is not a duty. And I'm just a philosopher. The logical entailment, if it is by no means a duty in the case of a bad pope, to pray that he has an unnaturally long life the way I would in the case of a good pope. I wouldn't even pray that in regard to a kind of so-so pope. But a bad pope, of course I'm not going to pray for that. I'm praying that he can go to heaven. I'm praying that he's not too scared. I'm praying for the public reconciliation, rectification in the name of rectificatory justice of ill works he's worked upon the church. And I'm praying for the state of the church. I guess that's 5 things if we kind of unfold some dimensions of those other 3. With my prayers and my family's prayers that I'm directing my kids to. So you see, there's no passive aggression, as I'm going to go through a list of the most papabile, the papabilissimi, in today's show. I absolutely rebut, defy any of you who would assert it, gainsay the notion that it is the duty of the faithful Catholic to have a selective memory or fall mute about facts that are already widely known, like the Pope is dying or is near dying, that there will be a conclave probably sometime in March. I've heard this from lots of different sources. I don't play those games. This is directness central. Now, if I were the brother of the Pope, if I were a Bergoglio, would I do the same show? No, because see, you guys always say, "Oh, be charitable, be in context." If this were my brother, I would have a different mien. I would approach this with a differentiated equipoise. I would countenance things utterly differently, because that changes. My duties would be to the man as a brother. That's not what it is. My duties are to the Holy Father, to speak respectfully. I have failed at times there, but it's a gray issue. I'm confident I have, and I've confessed it, but it is a gray issue because he's been, this is not wrong to say, among the worst popes. Many people, I'm among them, would contend the worst, relatively easily. So no one clutched their pearls.